There is a book that Michael Jackson read so obsessively that he wrote notes in the margins. A book that 50 Cent read in jail and immediately called Robert Greene to say he needed to collaborate. This video is for educational and entertainment purposes only. All historical examples are drawn directly from Robert Greene's published work and verified public sources. What authors hide does not endorse manipulation, deception, or harm toward others. A book that Jay-Z, Kanye West, and Drake have all publicly referenced. A book that Calvin Harris and DJ Premier liked so much they got tattoos inspired by it. And a book that prison authorities across the United States looked at and decided was too dangerous for inmates to read. Not because it contains violence, not because it contains illegal information, because it tells the truth about how power actually operates. And the people who run institutions that depend on power differentials decided that truth was a security threat. That book is The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene, published in 1998. Still selling, still banned. Still the most important book about human behavior that most people have never actually read in full. Welcome to What Authors Hide, the channel where we go inside the books that shaped the world and pull out what every summary leaves behind. If you're new here, subscribe right now, because what we do on this channel is not a recap, it is a dissection. We find the psychology, the verified history, and the hidden mechanisms that the 5-minute YouTube summaries never reach. Before we go further, a quick note. Everything in this video is drawn from Robert Greene's published work and verified historical sources. We are here to understand power, not to endorse exploitation.
And as you are about to discover, the best reason to understand these laws is not to use them on others. It is to recognize when they are already being used on you. Stay with me for the full video, because I have saved the single most psychologically devastating revelation in this book, a documented moment involving Queen Elizabeth I, and a strategy so cold it changed the course of European history for the second half. And it is the one piece of this book that nobody in the standard summaries ever talks about. Let me start with why this book exists, because the origin story of the 48 Laws of Power is itself one of the most interesting things about it. Before becoming an author, Robert Greene estimates that he worked 80 jobs, including as a construction worker, translator, magazine editor, and Hollywood movie writer. 80 jobs. Not because he was incompetent, because he kept finding himself in the same position over and over. He was the person in the room who understood what was happening, who could see the power dynamics operating around him, but who consistently ended up on the wrong side of them. Greene initially formulated some of the ideas in the 48 Laws of Power while working as a writer in Hollywood, concluding that today's power elite shared similar traits with powerful figures throughout history. That moment of recognition, sitting in Hollywood watching modern executives operate by the same psychological playbook as Machiavelli, Napoleon, and the emperors of ancient China, is the seed of everything. Greene spent years reading history, not as biography, as pattern recognition. He was looking for what did not change, what stayed consistent across 3,000 years and dozens of cultures and hundreds of different types of power struggles. And what he found was this: the technology changes, the language changes, the costumes change. The underlying psychology of how human beings respond to status, attention, and threat does not change. Not in 3,000 years. Not across any culture he studied. The book is not a modern invention. It is a collection and synthesis of 3,000 years of history. Greene drew heavily from the writings of thinkers like Niccolo Machiavelli, who wrote The Prince, and Sun Tzu, the Chinese general who authored The Art of War. But his sources go much wider. He pulls stories and lessons from the lives of cunning courtiers in royal courts, brilliant strategists like Napoleon Bonaparte, legendary con artists, and seducers from Casanova to P.T. Barnum. That is the architecture of this book. It is not one man's opinions. It is a distillation of documented human behavior across the longest possible sample size. And that is exactly what makes it so uncomfortable to read. Because when you see the same pattern repeat in ancient China, in Renaissance Italy, in 19th century France, and in the modern corporate boardroom, you cannot dismiss it as cultural or historical. It is structural. It is human. Now, let us go inside the laws that matter most. Not all 48. That is what every other channel does. We are going deeper into fewer laws, because depth is where the real psychology lives. Law 1. Never outshine the master. Most people hear this and think, this is about keeping your boss comfortable. Basic career advice. Stay humble. Let your manager take credit. Go deeper. Much deeper. Green documented one of the most spectacular examples of what happens when this law is violated in the history of European power. The story of Nicolas Fouquet, the finance minister to King Louis XIV of France. Fouquet was not just talented, he was extraordinary. He ran the finances of one of the most powerful kingdoms in the world. He was admired, he was cultured. He built one of the most breathtaking estates in France, Vaux-le-Vicomte. And in 1661, he made one of the most catastrophic social errors in recorded history. He invited King Louis XIV to a party at his chateau. The chateau was magnificent, staggeringly, impossibly magnificent. The gardens, the art, the architecture, the entertainment, it was visibly, undeniably superior to anything the king owned. Louis XIV attended. He saw everything. He said nothing. 3 weeks later, Fouquet was arrested on charges of embezzlement. He spent the rest of his life in prison. The chateau was stripped. The king hired Fouquet's architects and gardeners to build Versailles. Think about what actually happened there. Fouquet did not threaten the king. He did not challenge his authority. He threw a party, and in doing so, through pure, inadvertent comparison, made the most powerful man in France feel inferior in front of his entire court. That feeling, that fleeting, involuntary shift in the status dynamic, triggered something in Louis XIV that bypassed rational thought completely. There was no proportionality. There was no measured response. There was a threat, perceived, unconscious, and immediately acted upon. Think of it like this. Imagine you are the tallest person in every room you enter, for your whole life, and then one day, someone walks in who is taller. You do not decide to feel threatened. You feel it before you can think about it. And in a king, in a person whose entire identity is built on being the most powerful presence in every room, that feeling is not just uncomfortable, it is existential. Law 1 is Green's documentation of this mechanism, not as moral advice, as physics. The gravity of status anxiety operates whether or not the people involved are conscious of it. Fouquet was not conscious of it. That is exactly why he lost everything. Michael Jackson reportedly wrote in the margins of this book, and if you understand Law 1, you understand why someone who spent their entire career surrounded by executives, producers, and managers who all needed to feel essential to his success would study it that carefully. Now let me show you the law that Green built from 3,000 years of verified diplomatic history, and the one that most directly applies to your life right now, regardless of who you are or what you do. Law 4. Always say less than necessary. One oft-told tale about Henry Kissinger involved a report that Winston Lord had worked on for days. After giving it to Kissinger, he got it back with the notation, "Is this the best you can do?" Lord rewrote and polished and finally resubmitted it. Back it came with the same curt question. After redrafting it one more time, and once again getting the same question from Kissinger, Lord snapped, "Damn it, yes, it is the best I can do." To which Kissinger replied, "Fine. Then I guess I will read it this time." 4 words. Is this the best? That is all it took to make one of the most capable diplomats in American history rewrite the same document 3 times. Notice what Kissinger did not do. He did not critique the report. He did not identify weaknesses. He did not explain what needed to change. He created ambiguity, and the ambiguity activated Lord's own anxiety more effectively than any specific criticism could have. Think of it like a tug of war. If someone pulls the rope hard, you pull back. You have direction. You have something to resist against. But if they simply let the rope go slack, you stumble. You lose your footing. There is nothing to push against. The discomfort comes from inside you. That is what deliberate understatement does in conversation. It removes the thing you were expecting to respond to. And what fills the silence is your own uncertainty, which is always a harsher critic than any external voice. Powerful people impress and intimidate by saying less. The more you say, the more likely you are to say something foolish. Green documented this pattern across cultures and centuries. The leaders who spoke least were disproportionately feared and respected, not because silence is wisdom, but because silence forces other people to project meaning onto you. And what they project is almost always more impressive than anything you could have said. Your words define you, but your silence lets other people define you, and human beings, left to fill in blanks about powerful figures, almost always fill them in generously. Law 3. Conceal your intentions. This is the law that makes most readers uncomfortable, because it sounds like a recommendation for deception. It is something more specific than that, and more psychologically interesting. Hide your intentions not by closing up, with the risk of appearing secretive and making people suspicious, but by talking endlessly about your desires and goals, just not your real ones. Read that again. The instinct most people have when they want to conceal something is to go quiet. Stop volunteering information. Maintain a neutral expression. Say as little as possible. But Green's observation, backed by historical case study after case study, is that silence creates suspicion. People notice when you are withholding. Their threat detection systems activate. The absence of information triggers the same neurological alert as threatening information. The more sophisticated technique, documented across Richelieu's career, across Talleyrand's extraordinary survival through the French Revolution and Napoleon and the Restoration, across the entire diplomatic history of the European courts, is misdirection through noise. Give people something to track. Give them goals to believe in. Let them construct their model of you around what you have shown them, while the real objective operates underneath, invisible precisely because everything visible is pointing somewhere else. Napoleon's former advisor organized Napoleon's escape from Elba behind the scenes. He expected exactly what Napoleon would do afterwards, saw that he would be weak, and knew that he could then be dealt with for good. Talleyrand did not need to argue Napoleon's case directly. He needed Napoleon to argue his own case and then defeat himself. He created the conditions for a predictable outcome, and then stepped back and let human nature do the work. Think of it like a stage magician. The misdirection is never the absence of movement. It is deliberate, confident movement in the wrong direction. The hand you are not supposed to watch is always the hand that is doing something real. The hand you are watching is performing theater. That is the psychological architecture of Law 3. Give people theater. Reserve the real performance for when they have stopped watching. Now, here is the Queen Elizabeth story I told you to stay for. And it is the most sophisticated demonstration of power documented anywhere in this entire book. Queen Elizabeth I's diplomacy of the Virgin Queen, she always gave hope, but never satisfaction, playing both France and Spain to ensure peace for her country. Let me unpack what that actually means, because the summary does not capture how extraordinary it was. After Queen Elizabeth I ascended the throne, the first thing on everyone's mind was to find her a husband. But she, learning from her cousin's mistake, did not want any of that. She strung along many prospects instead of making a commitment. So she was able to establish good diplomatic relations and still remain independent. Elizabeth I never married. For 45 years on the throne, through constant pressure from Parliament, from foreign powers, from her own advisors, she refused to commit. And she turned that refusal into one of the most effective diplomatic tools in European history. France wanted an alliance with England. So Elizabeth entertained French suitors, warmly, encouragingly, with just enough visible interest to keep France hopeful and therefore cooperative. Spain wanted the same. So Elizabeth entertained Spanish suitors, with the same warmth, the same calculated ambiguity. Both nations spent decades believing that the English alliance might be theirs. Both nations moderated their behavior toward England accordingly. Both nations were played, simultaneously, by a woman who had decided that the moment she chose, she lost half her leverage. During her reign, much happened in the area. Popes came and went, Cesare Borgia rose and fell, Venice, Milan, Florence, and Rome all fared badly. But Mantua, which used the same strategy of never fully committing, remained independent and prospered. Think about the psychological mechanism operating there. Hope is more powerful than satisfaction. A fully satisfied suitor stops pursuing. A hopeful suitor keeps trying, keeps offering concessions, keeps moderating their behavior, keeps investing energy into maintaining the relationship. Elizabeth understood something that most modern negotiators still do not fully grasp. The moment of maximum leverage is not after you win. It is in the moment before you commit. In that moment, you hold everything. The instant you choose, you lose every option you did not choose. And with each option lost, a piece of your power dissolves. Law 33 is Green's documentation of this same principle. Find each person's need, their hope, their dream, their desperate want, and you find their vulnerability, not to exploit cruelly, but to understand where the real leverage lives in any relationship. Elizabeth was not cruel. She was strategic, and the result was 45 years of sovereign independence for a small island nation surrounded by the most powerful empires in the world. Now let me take you to the law that is most misunderstood, the one that divides people who read this book more than any other. Law 2. Never put too much trust in friends. Learn how to use enemies. When people first read this law, the reaction is almost always the same. That is cynical. That is dark. That is telling me to be suspicious of the people I love. That is not what it is saying. Be wary of friends. They will betray you more quickly, for they are easily aroused to envy. They also become spoiled and tyrannical. But hire a former enemy and he will be more loyal than a friend, because he has more to prove. In fact, you have more to fear from friends than from enemies. Green documented this pattern across hundreds of historical examples, and the psychological mechanism underneath it is one of the most counterintuitive things in this entire book. When you give power, position, or favor to a friend, you create a specific psychological dynamic that you did not create by earning those things yourself. Your friend now has what you gave them, and somewhere in their psychology, often without conscious awareness, they carry the knowledge that they did not fully earn it, that it came from you, that it can theoretically be taken back. That knowledge creates something, not gratitude, obligation, and obligation, over time, has a specific emotional trajectory. It starts as gratitude, it becomes familiarity, it becomes entitlement, and eventually, especially when something goes wrong, it becomes resentment. Because the person who feels permanently obligated to you will eventually start to experience that obligation, not as a gift, but as a debt they never asked to carry. A former enemy converted into an ally operates differently. They come with full awareness of what the relationship cost them. They carry no illusions about how it was earned. They have skin in the game, because the cost of betraying you is higher for someone who overcame hostility to reach an alliance than for someone who received it as a gift. Chinese Emperor Sung converted an enemy into an ally. Sung invited the enemy, King Shu, to his palace, where Shu thought he would be punished. After wining and dining him, Sung sent Shu home with a package. When Shu opened it, he found evidence documenting his conspiracy against Sung. He realized he was being spared, and became one of Sung's most loyal followers. Think about what Sung did there. He did not pretend the conflict did not happen. He did not offer forgiveness in exchange for loyalty. He demonstrated power, I know what you did, and then demonstrated generosity, and I am choosing to spare you anyway. The combination of those two signals created something that a simple friendship never could. Indebtedness backed by respect, backed by the clear understanding of what the alternative was. Law 2 is not telling you to distrust your friends. It is telling you to understand the specific psychological dynamics of obligation and loyalty, so that you can build relationships on foundations that will actually hold under pressure. Law 9. Win through your actions, never through argument. This is the law most people violate every single day, and the one whose psychological mechanism is easiest to understand once you see it. Green documented this through dozens of historical examples, but the principle behind it traces back to a simple feature of human cognition. When you win an argument, you make the other person wrong, and human beings do not respond to being made wrong by changing their minds. They respond by defending themselves. The ego does not update, it defends. Green documents how an ill-timed boast led to a courtier's demise, detailed examples of specific individuals whose words, rather than actions, became the instruments of their own destruction. Every debate you win through argument leaves the other person unconvinced but humiliated. And humiliated people do not become allies. They become enemies who are waiting for the moment to restore their dignity at your expense. But demonstrate something. Let your actions produce the result that your argument was trying to describe, and the other person's psychology has nothing to defend against. There is no attack to resist. There is only evidence. And evidence, delivered without the emotional charge of argument, can change minds in a way that direct confrontation almost never can. Think of it like trying to move a boulder. Pushing directly at it, putting your shoulder against the stone and shoving, is the instinctive approach. And it is the least effective. The boulder pushes back. But find the point of leverage, the fulcrum that lets you shift the boulder's weight distribution, and the same force produces dramatically different results. Argument is pushing directly at the boulder. Action is finding the fulcrum, now, the final revelation, the one that holds everything else together. Most people who encounter this book, who read the title, flip through the laws, absorb the historical stories, walk away with the same conclusion. This is a guide for ambitious, morally flexible people who want to get ahead. That reading is real, but it is the surface reading. And it is the reading that Green himself has pushed back against in interview after interview. Understanding power dynamics does not require you to act unethically. You can use this knowledge defensively, to protect yourself from manipulation, or you can choose which principles align with your values. Here is what Green is actually arguing underneath all 48 laws. You are already inside a game. You were born into it. Every social structure you inhabit, your workplace, your family, your friendships, your community, contains power dynamics that are operating whether or not you are conscious of them. The naive person believes the game is not being played. And the naive person, good-hearted, well-intentioned, often more talented than the people around them, consistently ends up on the wrong side of outcomes they never understood. As Machiavelli wrote, any man who tries to be good all the time is bound to come to ruin among the great number who are not good. The game is the same. Outwardly, you must seem to respect the niceties, but inwardly, unless you are a fool, you learn quickly to be prudent. And to do as Napoleon advised, place your iron hand inside a velvet glove. That quote, written in the 16th century, is what the entire 48 laws is built around. Not a call to ruthlessness, a call to consciousness. An acknowledgement that the world contains people who will use these dynamics whether you understand them or not. And that ignorance of them does not protect you. It simply removes your ability to respond. The book had become required reading for prison gangs, used as a manipulation guide and training manual. Think about that. In the most genuinely dangerous social environment that exists in American society, where power dynamics are not abstract but physical, immediate, and consequential, this book became essential reading. Not because the people reading it were uniquely evil, because in a high-stakes environment, the people who understand the rules of the game survive. The people who do not, do not. That is the real reason it was banned. Not to protect inmates from dangerous ideas, to protect the institution from inmates who understood how the institution worked. Here is what I want you to carry out of this video. 1. Robert Greene is the most banned author in U.S. prisons. Many facilities ban his books as a security measure. That single documented fact tells you more about the power of this book than any review ever could. 2. Law 1 is not about keeping your boss comfortable. It is about understanding the specific, automatic, disproportionate response that status threat triggers in people above you. That response operates whether or not anyone is conscious of it. 3. Law 4, say less than necessary, is the most practically applicable law in the book. Ambiguity is more powerful than critique. Silence forces projection, and projection almost always works in your favor. 4. Queen Elizabeth II's 45 years of strategic non-commitment was not weakness or indecision. It was one of the most sophisticated power strategies documented in European history. Hope is more powerful than satisfaction. The moment you commit, you lose every option you did not choose. 5. This book is not a manual for becoming ruthless. It is a map of a terrain that already exists. The people who understand the map navigate it. The people who do not believe the map is real tend to end up lost inside it. Tell me in the comments, which law hit you the hardest? Was it the Fouquet story? The man who threw a party and ended up in prison for the rest of his life? The Kissinger four-word technique that rewrote the same report 3 times? Or Queen Elizabeth's 45-year strategy of never choosing and winning everything because of it? I read every comment. The conversations in this community are some of the most interesting on YouTube. Tell me what landed. If this gave you something no other video on this book has given you, subscribe to What Authors Hide right now. Every week we go inside one book that shaped how the world operates. We find the psychology, the verified history, the hidden mechanisms that the summaries always miss. Next week we are going inside Cialdini's influence, the book that has been quietly used by the world's most powerful marketers, political campaigns, and yes, cult leaders for 40 years. I am going to show you the 6 psychological triggers Cialdini documented, and the specific moments in your daily life when each one is being used on you. Right now, without your awareness. Subscribe to What Authors Hide, and I will see you there.